the global economy attempting to recover from COVID-19, your next guest says the pandemic has created a unique opportunity to diversify global supply chains and invest in emerging markets in Africa. Joining us now to discuss is Franklin Amo. He is managing partner at Bayless Emerging Markets. They are a private equity firm that is focused on EMEA, primarily in Africa. Franklin, it's great to have you on. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC. We have often argued that in many ways, Africa may be the continent of the future because the demographics are so positive in so many places. Some of the youngest and most vibrant economies in the world. Specifically, where are you looking to invest on the continent, because it is big, and in what types of companies and countries?
Thanks for having me on, Brian. Good morning to you. Very early morning in New York. Thanks for having me. Yes, no, you're exactly right. We see a lot of opportunity on this continent. There are 1.2 billion people in Africa overall, and many of those people are very young, as you said. There's expected to be 4 billion people in Africa by the year 2100, and 1 in 4 of new babies being born over the next sort of 25 to 30 years are expected to be in Africa. In terms of where we focus, we look at West, Central, and East Africa. And the reason for that are some of those demographic trends, but also there's limited competition there for capital in terms of deals that we look at, investments that we try to pursue. And so, you know, we're more or less look and smell like your average middle market PE firm in the United States. And we look for similar sorts of opportunities with very sort of clear investment parameters in terms of companies that manufacture primarily. We look at the manufacturing and industrial space, again, because this is an area that's really underdeveloped, and therefore the opportunity to generate returns in those areas and also be paid a fair sort of compensation for your capital and the risk you take is strong in those sectors.
Yeah, I just had a friend that got back, of course, pre-pandemic, Franklin, from Rwanda, just saying that the optimism there was contagious, that the people and the economy seem so vibrant. But what are the returns that you're looking at? What types of capital returns can an investor expect in countries like that, where the reporting requirements on the financial side not only vary greatly by nation, of course, but in some cases aren't necessarily as stringent as many investors would like?
Sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely, Brian. You're exactly right. I think you'd be surprised. You know, in 2018, there were about $18.9 billion under management, sort of an institutional sort of management that we'd understand and be familiar with on the continent. Of that, around, I'd say 12.9 or so billion was in, you know, for market rate of return. Obviously, there are a lot of development investors in Africa, so excluding that kind of money. And of that pot, which is a very small pot, which is part of the opportunity. I mean, 12.9 billion, if you think about how many institutional funds there are in sort of North America alone, is a drop in the bucket. But of that money, you know, the return on that was 6.5%. And you compare that to developed market overall, it's 6.0. LATAM was 6.2%. So it was actually the second best performing region in the world behind East and Southeast Asia, which is something that would surprise a lot of people. You know, for us, you know, we're a typical PE shop, so we're off, you know, we're promising, or at least trying to go after fairly high levels of rates of return. And I think you get that by looking in sectors that are underappreciated. And for us, that's the manufacturing and industrial space, where you have both local governments, and as you said, they vary in terms of their capability and competency, and also the foreign development. Go ahead, sorry, Brian.
Franklin, quickly, quickly. Do they have the infrastructure now? I mean, could a country, you know, Ghana, whatever it is, Nigeria, Benin, some of the countries on your list, could they take manufacturing and supply chain away from China or Vietnam or Mexico or even the United States? Do they have that infrastructure there now, Franklin?
No, you're hitting the nail right on the head. I think there are ways away from doing that, and I think there's support necessary to get them to capitalize on this opportunity. But we're in a very interesting moment. This sort of geopolitical struggle between East and West, I think, will shake out very positively for a place like Africa, which in some ways is geopolitically friendly, particularly to the West, and also sort of has less of some of the concerns of some other regions. And I think COVID-19 has actually thrown a spotlight on diversifying away from East Asia.